Did you ever wonder what could have been with the AWA had things gone differently? Had their fortunes gone differently? Had certain wrestlers not left and perhaps more money would have been at the disposal of the Ganyas? Well, wonder no further. You can go to Brad Drake's YouTube channel and experience the 1987 Supermod for yourself, as Brad Drake starts off in May 1987 along with Greg Gagne, Baron Von Raschke, Vern Gagne himself, Nick Bockwinkel, Larry Zbyszko, Kurt Hennig, and a slew of others as he plays and saves the AWA.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson, the host of Bumps and Thumps, the Talk of Wrestling. I know if you're listening or watching this that you enjoy the podcast. In order to continue the podcast, we need financial support from viewers and listeners like you. There's a few ways you can do this. One is by going to anchor.fm/Brian, BRIAN Ferguson, FERGUSON, the number 3, and click on the support button. There you'll have choices of how much you would like to make in monthly contributions. You can also go to our Teespring store, where we have products such as this shirt, which is comfortable, durable, long-lasting. We have glassware. We have other great products that I know you will enjoy. We have PayPal. And through there, you can just make a contribution of whatever you want, and it will support the podcast. Again, thank you so much for all of you watching and listening today. And if you can, please support the podcast. Give a little bit. It'll go a long ways, and we can get those wrestlers and people on here that require financial compensation. Thank you again, and enjoy the podcast. Bumps the Talk of Wrestling. I'm your host, Brian Ferguson. My guest today is no stranger to professional wrestling. He has written with some of the greats like Bill Apter and Stu Sachs. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to have on here today Mr. Craig Peters. Craig, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Brian, for inviting me. And I would also say some of the other greats I spent time with were Dan Shockett.
Yes.
And Eddie Elner, Bob Smith, a few others whose names escape me at the moment. Dave Rosenbaum.
Yes.
And I'm sure more names will come up as we talk over the next few minutes.
Yes. I want to thank you again for coming on. I've read magazines since I was about, probably 10 years old, which was quite a while ago. When there was a bunch of them, Inside Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Sports Review, you name it. There's probably, at that time, a lot of magazines out at then. So let's talk.
Yeah, at our peak, we were doing a bunch of them. And, there's a Twitter feed, and I could look it up and give you the exact feed, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's Wrestling Magazine.
Yeah.
But great feed, and he'll pull old magazines and tweet photos and bits of stories from them, and my stuff comes up every once in a while. And he tweeted something recently, Wrestling Bad Guys magazine, and I completely forgot that we did it. It was basically like Inside Wrestling or The Wrestler, but from a bad guy's perspective.
Oh, wow.
Like the bad guys were the good guys. It was an interesting editorial twist. But I've forgotten about that one for years. But yeah, it was fun to see that.
That's awesome. Let's get started a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about growing up, where you grew up at, your childhood.
Okay, I haven't grown up yet, but I'm working on that.
Growing up, okay, it's continuous. Where you grew up at, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up on Long Island.
Okay.
Or as we say, Long Island, if you're a Long Islander. It's pretty basic suburban, lifestyle growing up. I have to say, for the context of this podcast, I was not really a wrestling fan growing up.
Okay.
I went to the matches once or twice. I actually lived just a couple miles from Nassau Coliseum, and I think my brother took me. We saw Bruno one time, but I would watch it on TV now and again. But I wouldn't call myself a fan. What I really was growing up was a hardcore fan of comic books.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
I was a big Marvel guy, but I bought everything on the stands: Marvel, Charlton, DC, um, everything.
Yeah.
And to sort of fast forward a little bit, when it came time to think about and start writing about pro wrestling, particularly in those days. I guess today I haven't really followed it as diligently today as I did back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
In my time with the magazines, it was 81 to 96.
Okay.
But I sort of looked at it as, okay, these are like comic book characters in flesh and blood, and that's how I was able to sort of relate to wrestlers and click into what was going on. And I picked it up very quickly, I think.
Yeah.
And very quickly grew to appreciate what they were doing and how good the best of them were at what they did.
Yeah, that's interesting that you were not a wrestling fan. That's kind of a twist on things. I wanted to ask you. Yeah, I wanted to ask. Okay.
Stu Sachs, right? Who was a
Yeah.
and did a wrestling newsletter and
Yeah.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bill also, right?
Yeah, Bill. Let's talk a little bit journalism. Did you go to school for writing journalism, or did you?
I went to college. I went to Colgate University, upstate New York. Originally, when I went, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but after about a year of studying in that direction, I decided that wasn't the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I got heavily involved in the college radio station and the college newspaper, and that really sort of got my juices flowing, particularly the newspaper. And I realized that, yeah, I want to do something in this area. Young, stupid kid. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something. This excited me, and writing excited me, and I wanted to do something with that, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated college, I went job hunting, and I had a lousy resume, as all fresh college graduates tend to have, I guess. And I sent my resume out to everything under the sun. And I should say, I also did a lot of freelance writing at the time. So I was writing for a newspaper that still exists called The Island Ear, which was the Long Island's free weekly music newspaper. It did a ton of interviews, record reviews, concert reviews, that sort of thing. Had a couple of concert reviews published in Newsday, the Long Island newspaper. So I was doing a bunch of writing beyond, while I was trying to find a real job. And so I sent my resume out everywhere. And I saw this ad in, I believe it was in Newsday, for London Publishing. And they were advertising for a writer. And that was pretty much all the ad said. So I sent them my resume because I didn't know what London Publishing was. Writer, great, I could do that. And I get a call back from Peter King. And Peter King says, hey, look, I like your resume. We're looking to hire a writer. We want, somebody to come in full time. I said, oh, that's great. What do you do? Well, we're a magazine publishing company. Oh, that's cool. What sort of magazines do you do? Well, pro wrestling and boxing. And I kind of went, let me think about it. And so I hung up the phone, and I thought about it. And like I said, I wasn't a wrestling fan, so it didn't really appeal to me. And a couple of weeks later, Pete called me back and said, listen, we're still, like your resume, still really interested. Want you to come in for an interview. So I had nothing else going on at the time. And I said, yeah, what the heck? I'll go in and check it out. And when I went into the office, I looked around, and if I showed you my office today, I mean, you can see a little bit on Zoom, but it looked very much like the office back then. It was an interesting atmosphere. It was all young guys, like for the most part, like myself. There was Stu Sachs was there, Peter King, myself. You had a couple guys in the art department, a couple of older people working on the production side, but I kind of looked around, and then Pete explained the job to me, and he said it was, we're hiring someone to write 3 stories a day, every day. So it's basically 3 1,000-word stories a day.
Whoa.
Like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I figured, all right, this will pay some bills while I find something that I really want to do.
Yeah.
And I quickly found out that I really like this.
Yeah.
And what I thought was going to be a couple of weeks turned into 15 years.
Yeah. Wow. 1,000 words 3 times a day.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Each story is about 1,000 words.
Wow.
And yeah, 3 stories a day was sort of the pace that you wanted to do.
That's
I'll tell you a story about that.
Let's hear it.
Years later, when I left the magazines, I ran away and joined the circus, quite literally. I joined Feld Entertainment, which is the company that owned Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. They also owned the Disney on Ice shows. And they did a bunch of other stuff as well. And one of the things they were working on while I was there was a stage show based on Goosebumps, the kids' horror books.
Yeah.
And I had opportunity to have lunch with R.L. Stine, the author of the Goosebumps books. And I sat right next to him and we were talking, very nice guy, very personable, and we're chatting back and forth. And I told him how I got my start in wrestling magazines and the whole bit. And he started his career in almost exactly the same way.
Wow.
But he did it with movie magazines.
Okay.
And we were comparing notes on how the movie magazines were produced versus how the wrestling magazines were produced.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah. Wow. I wanted to talk to you a little bit too. I read that you were also you took pictures, like photography.
Yes.
So
yes, I did.
So, when I did the podcast with Bill Apter a few years back, he took a lot of pictures, and I'm just wondering, was that kind of was that kind of like part of the, you said you did 1,000 words for a story 3 times a day, plus pictures. So that had to be really kind of time consuming for you.
Yeah, it was. And, boy, we're talking the early mid 80s now, right? So
that's
a few years ago. So Bill, if you're listening, forgive me if I'm misremembering, Stu as well. But I think what happened was there was sort of a desire, because we were starting to put out more magazines. We need a lot of photos. We're doing a lot of magazines.
Yeah.
And so the idea was that, all right, we were still allowed into the garden at the time. So, let's, instead of one guy going ringside, let's send 2 guys. One can shoot color, one could shoot black and white. And so, all right, so I raised my hand. Sure, I could do that. How hard can that be? Enthusiastic. I'm willing to try anything.
Yeah.
So, Bill would shoot color, I would shoot black and white.
Okay.
So we get twice as much out of each match.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a photographer when I started there per se.
Yeah.
But learning under Bill, was sort of one of the great classrooms for learning how to do photography like that. And at that time, around the garden, I mean, this, like I said, early 80s. So Paul Heyman was shooting on the ring next to us.
Yeah.
George Napolitano, the Japanese photographers. It was a pretty exciting place to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, I loved it. And as it went along, so I would go to the matches with Bill. Every month at the garden. We started doing road trips. We did more road trips. That grew into doing some TV interviews, and it sort of snowballed from there. But I loved it. I loved learning from Bill.
Yeah.
Photography, because no one's better.
Really nice guy. When I interacted with, I've never met him in person per se, but before he is
the best, one of my dearest friends.
Yeah, great guy. Absolutely love him. From what I've had interaction with him, an absolute genuine great guy.
Yep.
Let's okay. So he's brought up something kind of interesting to me. So you talked about getting into the garden, but before that, you guys went around traveling. When you took those pictures, and what was probably one of your favorite pictures that you probably took? I saw one the other day on the internet with you and Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes is pouring the Jack Daniels into your glass, and you're staring down at it. And it's an oldie. It's probably from 82, 83, I'm assuming. But it's a great shot. But it's hard to find you in pictures with other wrestlers. I found 2. You with Michael Hayes, and you with King Kong Bundy with Bill Apter.
There's a bunch, though. There's a bunch. There's a bunch we didn't use in the magazine.
Well, but I'm saying the 2 with you in it specifically. Those are the only, I couldn't find any other. I mean, but of course that's the internet. I mean, but
there is a bunch. One of the earliest photos where I was in it was this would have been oh this would have been 1981. I want to say later in the year because I'd only been working at the company for a few months.
Okay.
And Bill and I went to the garden, and Mil Mascaris
Yeah. Yes.
was on the card, and I was complaining about a stiff neck, and so I don't know why Bill mentioned it. He goes, "Oh, Mil can fix your neck." It's like, what are you talking about? And so Mascaris had me laid down on the floor, and he grabbed a towel and he cradled my head in the towel, and he said, just relax, relax, relax. And I relaxed my neck, and he yanked up on one side of the towel, cracked my neck
Oh.
into place. I think it helped. I found out later that my sore neck was the result of having mononucleosis.
Oh wow.
And I'll tell you a very, very quick magazine story about that. I had a really, really bad case of it. My blood values were such that they thought I had leukemia.
Oh my
And I was laid
gosh.
up for a couple of months. So I'd only been working at the magazine for a couple of months, and I was out of work for a couple of months. But Stanley Weston, who owned the magazines, said to me, "Don't worry about it. Just get better. Your job will be waiting for you when you get back." And continued to pay me all the way through while I was sick on
Wow.
top of it.
That's
So that to me just is sort of a great example of the kind of guy that Mr. Weston was.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard
But yeah,
nothing
there
but
was
great things about
Bill
Mr. Weston.
Mascaris. Oh boy, photos with me in them. There were there's a bunch of photos, and I'm thinking of photos we actually used in the magazines.
Yeah.
Me and the Road Warriors.
Okay.
There's a great photo that cracks me up when I see it. I don't know. I think we used it in the magazine, but Bill and I went to the gym with Lance Von Erich.
Okay.
And Lance and I are back to back. I've got my shirt off, and Lance is lifting a barbell with like giant weights on both ends. And the barbell I'm lifting has like nothing on either end. It's just the bar, but like I'm straining more than he is. Mugging for the camera. It's a pretty funny photo.
That's
Yeah,
a
there
great
were
one.
a few. There were a few. Captain Lou
Promotions.
Albano was choking me at my desk one time.
Ah, okay.
Jerry Lawler, questioning some of the stories I've written, also at my desk. So yeah,
Awesome.
a lot of fun stuff.
Promotions, you were around a lot of them. When it was the territory days, one time there's 26 promotions out there running around. What was the one that you really enjoyed being at, working with, that didn't give you, that gave you a lot of access, a lot of ability to do your job? What was probably one of your favorite ones?
Oh boy. There's a couple, and it's hard to pick a favorite. The two that really stand out, I would say, would be Crockett,
Okay.
shooting the shows in Atlanta, at the Omni was always exciting, and also the TV tapings.
Yeah.
With Gordon Soley. Gordon became a dear friend, and those were just great. Just the flavor and atmosphere of those TV tapings was like nothing else.
Yeah.
And the Omni crowds were fantastic. It was Madison Square Garden South, and probably world class.
Okay. Texas,
I think about the particularly the event in Texas Stadium when Kerry got the belt from Flair. 43,000 fans. Boy, to be ringside there and shoot. And just to be there for that moment and see what was going on. But yeah, we had great experiences in terms of the promotions giving us access and letting us be at ringside, letting us set up studio equipment backstage, so that and I think this was a Crockett show, might have been at the Omni, but I remember particularly after it was a Jimmy Valiant match, and he came out of the match all bloody, and we had the portable photo studio set up backstage with the backdrop and everything. And I'd be back there, and he'd come through the doors to head back to the dressing room. Jimmy, come here a second, hurry up, and get him in front of the backdrop to pose all bloody and sweaty, in the studio setting with, what a great photo. It was just terrific. Much better than, like the concrete wall or something like that.
Right.
Covers.
Yeah.
Because you're getting them while their energy is up and they're and they're looking good, and they're sort of pumped up from the match. So it was a
Yeah.
great moment to capture the photo.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to just pick your brain. I mean, we only have about an hour. I would just love to pick your brain for hours on stuff, but I want to talk to you a little bit. Okay, so you mentioned earlier about getting into the garden, and you got in there at a certain point. And
Yeah.
Bill talked about that too, in 85 or 6, whatever it was, when Vince said, you guys aren't allowed, we're doing our own magazine thing. Yep. How were you able to still do stories on the WWF, getting photos and all that stuff? How were you able to do that if you weren't allowed into their shows or their events?
Sometimes I wonder.
I mean, because when I read the magazines in the 80s, you guys had, besides WWF, you had AWA and everything else. But I mean, when Bill said we weren't allowed in there, I'm like, how are you getting all this information and all these photos?
For a while, as I recall, and again, like I mentioned earlier, my memory might be off a little bit here, but I think even though we got kicked out of the garden initially, I think we were still able to shoot some spot shows for a while.
Okay.
So we were able to get by with some of that. You're not getting all of the big headline matches, but you're still getting, individual star matches and that sort of thing. So I think we had a lot of spot show material.
Okay.
And we would also shoot from the stands.
Okay.
In fact, what probably the most famous photo I ever took, and this was before we got locked out, but I was in the stands for it, was Snuka on top of the cage about to dive down onto Backlund. And if I got royalties for every time they printed that photo, I'd be a rich man today.
Yes.
But I just happened to be sitting in the right place in the arena, because everyone knew Snuka was going to go up and do the dive on Backlund, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, please be that corner, please be that, because I had the view I had of the ring, I had like a 1 in 4 shot, depending on where he was going to go.
Yeah.
And it turned out he picked exactly the right corner. He was facing me while he was on top of the cage. And it just turned into one of the perfect wrestling photos of all time.
Yeah, it is one of the best. I've seen that photo. Absolutely. Yeah. So, when you guys, I want to just kind of elaborate. So like WrestleMania, right? 1 was at the Garden. Were you guys allowed in there then? Or was that when you guys were like, okay, this is it?
I'm pretty sure. Oh boy. I'd actually have to go back and look at tape on that one. I don't know if we were kicked out before 1. I'm pretty sure we were kicked out by the time 2 rolled around.
Yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure about 1. I think, it's my memory fails me on that.
Oh, it's all right, no problem.
I have to check the videotape.
Yeah. I want to ask you something else. How did that, when they told you that, I mean, was that just kind of a punch in the gut to you guys? Or, I mean, how did you take that?
A little bit, yeah. I think so. It was, because wrestling was on such an enormous upswing.
Yeah.
And, we wanted to be a part. Well, we were a part of it.
Right.
At least from the magazine side. And we wanted to give the best possible face to the business that we could. We weren't there to break kayfabe or anything. We were, we were trying to help everybody.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to do the best job we possibly could. And that includes access, ringside access, studio access. And WWF decided they wanted to do their own magazine, which, can't fault them for the decision.
Right.
Hey, wrestling's on an upswing. These are our guys. We want to be exclusive. So, all right, that's the decision. Yeah, it stinks, but we'll figure out a way to get by. And we did. We did it with, like I said, shots from the stands, spot shows. If we knew somebody was coming to WWF, and again, all credit to Bill, because he was the liaison between the magazines and the business. As much a part of the business as any of the boys.
Yeah.
And if somebody told him, hey Bill, I'm going over to Vince next month. Oh great, let's get you in the studio and get a bunch of photos now before you go.
Okay.
So we would stock up on photos and have it ready. And then of course Vince would change the guy's gimmick and we'd be out of luck. But
yeah.
At least we'd have stuff to work with a little bit.
Yeah. Oh.
We squeaked by.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit chemistry. with wrestlers,
Sure.
with promoters, who in your mind was one of the ones that you really had a good connection with, a wrestler that just, you guys got along great, you guys just had that good chemistry with each other, he'd tell you anything you want to know? Is there anybody in particular that just sticks out in your mind for you?
Well, again, I'll sort of defer to Bill in a lot of ways on this question, because Bill had the chemistry and the relationships with everybody in the business.
Yeah.
And I was sort of Bill's shadow. So, just as, if Bill walked into a dressing room and the wrestlers looked at him like, who the heck is this guy? And one of the guys said, hey, this is Bill, he's all right. Well, then Bill's all right to everybody.
Right.
Same sort of thing. If Bill said that I was all right, then I was all right to the guys.
Okay.
But it was Bill's relationships. Like I can't honestly say that I had any relationship with any wrestlers that superseded any, that even came close to anything that Bill had.
Yeah.
I was sort of riding along in Bill's wake. Having said that, the guys that I got along with the best and got to know the best, both Road Warriors.
Okay, Hawk and
awesome.
Animal. Yeah.
Hawk and Animal, tremendous. And I'm going to add two in particular I want to call out. Paul Ellering and Nikita Koloff. Both of whom actually called me on my phone some years ago when they heard that my wife had passed away from cancer. So class acts, both of them. And if they're hearing this, if this gets to them, thank you, gentlemen, for that. Much appreciated. Cornette was great. Always loved when I was taking photos of him. He would play at ringside. We'd have a lot of fun. Ole Anderson was. I remember walking in one time to a TV taping in Atlanta, and Bill and I were going to do our PWI press conference, and I remember Ole going, here comes Craig Peters. I guess that's better than no Peters at all. And Gordon Soley was great. We had the guys of sort of that era were really terrific. And I just had so much fun. But I think for me personally, Warriors, Nikita, Ellering, Cornette. I'm sure there are a few others I'm leaving out there, but Johnny B. When we were doing WCW magazine, I got to know some of those guys. Johnny B. Bad, he was terrific. Mark Merrow, yep. And again, Nikita was there for a while, and just like I said, I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, and my apologies for anybody.
I just said a few. You named more than three, so you're good. I want to tell you, Nikita Koloff, I did a podcast with him probably about a year and a half ago. Great guy, great guy.
Tremendous. I still have when they would have pay-per-views in Baltimore. There was a restaurant near the arena called Sabatino's.
Okay.
That everybody would go to after the matches, and I remember going to that restaurant. Nikita, the Warriors were there. I forget who else was there, Bill and I. And Nikita signed a matchbook from Sabatino's restaurant, but he did it in the Cyrillic alphabet.
Okay.
Which I thought was awesome. That's just real commitment to character.
Yeah, that's awesome. No,
I still have that somewhere in my archive. Yeah.
Nice guy. So
I should donate that to Aptors Alley.
Yeah, you should. Was there, and you don't have to give out names, was there anybody that just didn't, like, they've just like treated you guys like trash? And I shouldn't say trash, just didn't have the respect for you that you're trying to help the business and promote their character and the business, and they just were like, don't want nothing to do with you.
I honestly don't recall anything. It's not for. I mean, hey, it's so many years later. If there was something, I don't care. I'm not involved in the business. I'd name a name. I don't care. But I honestly can't think of anybody. I mean, there was. If it was somebody not wanting to have anything to do with us and Vince comes to mind, and I don't want to put huge negative connotations there, but it
Right.
was a business decision, right?
Right.
It was like, hey, you guys are doing a magazine, we're doing a magazine, so I don't want you in. That's business, right? Everybody else, it was, they loved having us down there, so
Yeah.
they treated us well.
Good.
Yeah, come on in, take photos. How can I get on the cover? How come I'm so low in the ratings? They they complain about things that way, but yeah, there was never anything like, I have nothing to do with you. I don't want to, don't take my photo.
Okay.
I honestly can't remember any instance of that happening.
Okay. Was there besides the WWF, was there a promotion that ever just gave you guys like, okay, you can do this and that, and that's it? I mean, very little to no access.
Limited,
but besides the WWF, which had a business decision, just a company that was just like, you know what? Yeah, we don't need you. But
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
I
didn't think so, but you never know.
Like AWA, Portland, and like a lot of the promotions, like we would, Bill would do a lot of road trips. I would do a lot of road trips with him, but we also had a lot of stringers out there.
Yeah.
So like we wouldn't get out to Portland often, but we had somebody in Portland who sort of had a relationship with that office the way Bill had a relationship with the business.
Okay.
And so they were able to get us photos of the matches there. So there were certain areas of the country where we worked like that, but I can't think of anybody that sort of limited our stuff. It was always, I think it was really more a case of, how can we get more?
Yeah.
How can we get more covers? How can we get more stories? Everybody wanted more.
I always wanted more.
There wasn't sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's right.
You had WWF and NWA, and that probably took up 80% of the real estate in the magazine. So everybody else that was left were all sort of, how can I get more?
Yeah. So when you started in 81, there was 26, 27 territories. By the time you left in 96, there was, WWE or F at the time, and WCW was the two big ones.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think
so
AWA might have been still.
AWA folded in 91, and how was that on impact on your magazine as far as those? Because when I was a kid, you had World Class, you had UWF, you had AWA, you had the Pacific Northwest, you had the Central States, all these different territories in your magazine, and they're ranked. They'd have their top 10, and when that condensed down due to closing their doors, I'm sure that hurt your magazine some. I mean, but did it impact it significantly, or was it just you had to adjust your way of covering things in writing?
I think it was both.
Okay.
Like it impacted the mags, and I sort of look at it relative to the mid 80s peak, right?
Yeah.
When Rock and Wrestling Connection started blowing up, and wrestling really sort of the first wave of mainstream media for wrestling.
Yeah.
So to say, the NBC shows started up, and it was really breaking out in a big way. And we put out a ton of magazines, PWI, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, Wrestling USA, Wrestling 85, Wrestler Annual, Wrestling Bad Guys that I mentioned earlier, Wrestling Superstars. There were tons of them. We were putting out, some months we would put out 4 or 5, maybe even 6 a month, I want to say. Certainly 5 a month in some months.
Yeah.
That's a lot of magazines.
A lot.
And so by the time, the early 90s rolled around, wrestling had cooled off some, and so did the magazines, so we contracted. The quarterly magazines dropped off the schedule. I think a couple of monthlies probably turned into bi-monthlies. Bi-monthlies turned into quarterlies. We sort of scaled things down a bit. So it definitely affected the magazines in that way, for sure.
Yeah.
Sheer volume of them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I every time they come out when I was a kid, I'd buy I'd beg my mom, I need to get a buck or a buck and a half, whatever it was, for Inside Wrestling, buck and a half for PWI. She's like, these are costing too much. And I'm like, Mom, some days these could be collector's items. She just laughed
That's right.
at me. She laughed at me. And now they are.
Now I have to turn the tables and ask you a question. Did you buy Sports Review Wrestling?
I did. I have.
And did you buy Sports Review Wrestling for the wrestling?
Yeah, I did actually. I didn't do the apartment. That was a little bit before my time. Apartment wrestling.
Okay.
But I have a issue with Bockwinkel on the cover from 1980 when he's all bloody. Bill Apter took the picture. He told me.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite photos from Bill Apter is that photo. It's just because I was a big AWA guy because I'm from Wisconsin originally. I was born and raised.
Oh, okay,
there.
sure. Yep.
So I had big time exposure to the AWA, Bockwinkel, Gagne, the who's who before the WWF.
Right.
Got them all, but yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit of something that's a little bit. I found out later in life, some of your writers were not real. Matt Brock, Liz Hunter, they were fake writers or fake names. I don't know who wrote those articles.
They were nom de plumes. No, it's funny too. Because, well, so Matt Brock was great. Actually, I think this is. I don't think I'm telling any secrets out of school. I think this is mentioned on other wrestling podcasts. But
Okay.
The photo of Matt Brock. There were actually a couple of photos of Matt Brock that were used in his columns. Those were actually of our production manager, a guy by the name of Carl Lavick. HLAVAC, with the hat, and he had a cigarette.
Yeah, the cigarette hanging out. Yeah.
And the cigarette was hilarious because Carl was vehemently anti-smoking. So we would needle him about that once in a while. But Matt Brock was the Jimmy Breslin of the magazines. Because we're all a bunch of young guys writing wrestling magazines, but we needed some other personalities in there. So that was Matt. He was the Jimmy Breslin. He was the who was the columnist out of Chicago? Mike Royko. He was like the Mike Royko type, sort of the crusty veteran. He always liked to sit in the cheap seats because he wanted to be, with the fans, not the VIP. Yeah. And he was fun. He was just he was a very defined personality. So he was fun to write. Yeah. And Liz, of course, was the female.
Right. Yeah.
The female perspective, which was, interesting because it was guys writing the female perspective for years. But I think Brandy Mankiewicz wrote Liz Hunter.
Okay.
For a while. So we did get the female perspective for real in there for a while.
Wow.
But, and most people believe that Dan Shockett is in that same category. He's not. Absolutely was not.
Yeah. I thought that too for years. And I found out it wasn't.
Dan was, and, tragically died due to cancer at a very young age.
Yeah.
But he was an interesting guy. I think had Dan lived, he would have been extremely successful in writing in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
He had a very diverse and eclectic set of interests, whether he'd come in and write wrestling. He wrote for gentlemen's magazines. You'd ride with him during lunch in his car. He'd pop in a cassette, and it would be Gilbert and Sullivan operettas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's like, boy, he always had something interesting to say about every topic. Just very, and God, I would have loved to have seen what he would have done with a full career.
Yeah.
And people think Eddie Elner similarly falls in that category as Matt and Liz, but Eddie is as real as you or I, and living in California, and runs a yoga studio, in fact.
Oh, wow. Cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. The other sort of personalities that fall into the Liz and Matt category they came about when, after we got kicked out of the garden, so to say, kicked out of the matches from photography, it also became an issue about quoting the wrestlers.
Oh, okay.
So we had to skirt around that somehow. So we created a series of experts. We had Thomas Pilliard was an expert that we would quote about WWF issues. We had my favorite was Zenith Abraham, who was the astrologist to the stars, and she would give the astrology readings for. Again, we need WWF quotes. We can't quote the guys. Well, let's
Yeah.
come up with Dr. Sidney M. Basil, the psychologist.
Yes, I remember that one.
Who I was told recently that Dr. Sidney M. Basil actually popped up in a WWE magazine.
Oh, okay.
At some point, which I think is just wonderful.
Yeah, that's
she brings it full circle.
So full circle, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. No, that's one more question.
Yes, whatever you want.
We're here. Can you tell us your last article that you wrote for a wrestling magazine? What was it about, and which magazine was it in?
Wow, that's a great question, and I don't know.
Okay, well,
the last one. What? Wow. Now I'm curious. I have to go back and figure it out.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to stump you there.
Totally stumped me.
Oh, okay. Well, then another question. I know you say you don't watch it very much now, or follow it, I should say. Is that just because of the dynamic, how much it's changed over the years for you, or is it just that you're busy and you're not covering it anymore, so you don't?
Yeah, more the latter. I'll channel flip and land on it occasionally, and I'll watch a few minutes of a match. But I've fallen out of the storylines, and I don't know the personalities like I did. So it doesn't have any context for me. So it doesn't mean as much as if I had been following it. So it's a little frustrating that way, right? But occasionally I'll see clips online or a few minutes. One thing I did see that I really liked, and I guess this is sort of old school but not old school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was AEW.
Yes.
Did a retro show at one point.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
I remember what you're talking about.
They did an episode where it was almost like a WCW TV taping. It had that studio wrestling flavor to it, and all of their wrestlers took different personas for the show. It was great. I thought it was one of the most. Again, coming from old school, right?
Yeah,
I thought
old school. Yeah,
it was right in my wheelhouse, and I thought it was fantastic. They really sort of nailed the flavor of what they were trying to emulate. But aside from that, I haven't really seen a whole lot of the current stuff. So my apologies to all the current guys.
No, by all means, no.
And girls.
So one more question for real this time. What are you doing now? What kind of projects are you working on, or if you're working on anything, or?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, after I left the magazines, I ran away and joined the circus.
Yes.
So I did that for about 10 years. Then I started my own company doing digital marketing and communications.
Okay.
I took a 2-year detour to work for a cell phone startup company. Went back to my own company for a couple of years, and one of my clients at that time was Bank of America.
Okay.
And they made me an offer to join them full time. So that was about 10 years ago, and I am still working for them. I am a senior content strategist working on their artificial intelligence customer assistance presence in their mobile app, which is a very long-winded way of saying I'm working on their on Erica, which is sort of their chatbot. I shouldn't say chatbot. That's not a word we like. But it's an artificial intelligence customer assistance.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty
software.
cool.
So it's kind of like their version of Alexa or Siri, and it's really interesting because I'm learning about the whole AI world. And when I ask Alexa to do something and it answers in a certain way, I kind of understand now. Oh, that's why it's saying that. But it's not exactly a straight line, wrestling to circus to banking, but it's it's all sort of communications.
Yes.
And it's a pretty cool place to be. It's fascinating.
Yeah. No, that's great.
But yeah, about the furthest thing from wrestling you could imagine, right?
Yeah, but hey, it sounds like you're really good at it. If you've been there 10 years, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's fun place to be.
Mr. Craig Peters, thank you for coming on today, sir. I really, really, really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it as well. Always happy to talk about the good old days. It was a lot
Yes.
of fun with great people,
Yeah.
and many of whom that I'm still friends with to this day. And boy, it was a unique time, nothing like it. And
Probably nothing
anybody
like
who
it
was
since.
there was just knows what it was like. It was a lot of fun, and happy to relive it for an hour or so here.
Yeah,
So
that's
thank you
great.
for that opportunity.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. Again, Mr. Craig Peters, thank you, sir, for coming on, and we will talk to you soon.